Why me? Why do I have to deal with this? I don't want to die, I want to live. I don't know since when, the world has changed. Holes constantly appear, spewing out all sorts of strange creatures. The human world stands on the brink of collapse in desperate circumstances. They appear, engaging in life and death battles with ferocious strange creatures. Their appearance has saved this almost doomed planet, and the survivors have begun enthusiastically exploring unfamiliar worlds. They have a very strange name, hunters. His name is Sung Jin Wo. With an ordinary appearance, after graduating from high school, he didn't have any special talents. Choosing to be a hunter was different from others. Not because he liked it but because he received the Hunter Association's subsidy to send money for his mother's hospital fees while she was hospitalized. In the E-rank dungeons, the weakest place in this world. Normal people don't need support and can easily pass through, but Sung Jin Wo is more easily remembered, every time he gets seriously injured in the E-rank dungeons, so he is nicknamed the weakest hunter of mankind. It's a construction site for another world gate that's rumbling underground. Hunters receive orders to exterminate and immediately rush there. Sung Jin Wo is no exception. Today, he still has to do extra work with the worst strength. He is even more easily remembered. For him, joining a team can compensate for his weakness in strength, and it's also the fastest way to make money. In the team participating in this mission, there is also a female B-rank support who regularly assists him. Among the crowd, Mr. Song is the highest ranking person, so everyone agrees immediately. The Extreme Event Eradication team consisting of 17 hunters has formed a group. Before entering, an elderly man said to Sung Jin Wo, "You go last, don't get hurt anymore." Then, everyone went in one by one before entering. Sung Jin Wo sighed, "Today, I must try my best." Not surprisingly, Sung Jin Wo got injured again. As his good friend, Duhee felt both heartbroken and helpless. She didn't understand why Sung Jin Wo was so weak yet insisted on being a hunter. Sung Jin Wo bitterly watched everyone easily defeat the monsters. Compared to his own full of injuries, he knew well that he was not suited for this job, but he had no other choice, only to try his best for his hospitalized mother's sake. After defeating the monster, Sung Jin Wo hoped that items would drop. The old man held a shiny stone, even though it was only C-rank, its value was still over 50,000. For Sung Jin Wo, C-rank monsters were still too far away. He only received the lowest grade stone. At this moment, a hunter shouted, "Look, there's another entrance over there." Appearing in front of everyone is a cave, specifically a double cave. Unexpectedly, the legendary double cave truly exists. The old man emitted a stream of energy towards the cave, only to see its profound depth. Mr. Khan, experienced, sensed that there would be a final boss inside. This situation needs to be reported to the association, but doing so might result in another hunter stealing the final boss. Considering the danger to their lives, Mr. Song, as the team leader, proposed a vote among the 17 hunters to decide. The result was 8 in favor and 8 against. The deciding vote belonged to Sung Jin Wo, clutching the low-grade stone tremblingly for his younger sister's schooling. For his mother lying in the hospital. He decided to vote in favor. Slowly, everyone entered the deep corridor. At the end of the corridor are 2 giant doors, with magnificent architecture that intimidated everyone. Mr. Song slowly pushed the door, warning everyone that it could be dangerous ahead. Anyone scared can turn back, there's someone strong leading the way. Everyone confidently followed the elder, and then the elder opened the door. Revealed in front is a gigantic palace, with torches burning, statues wielding weapons, a statue of the goddess holding a musical instrument, and most notably, a statue of the king sitting in the middle of the hall. Next to the statues is a plaque listing the rules of the cave. The first rule is to respect the true God, the second is to praise the God, the third is to prove your faith. Violating the rules means one cannot leave alive. Sung Jin Wo felt that something was very wrong with this temple. It was unusually quiet and eerie. Suddenly, the door behind them closed by itself, startling everyone. A hot-headed young man cursed loudly, unable to tolerate this eerie place. He was about to push the door open when a statue raised its hand with a sword, accusing the blasphemer right on the spot. Everyone panicked as the stone statue moved. This was only a D-rank dungeon, and the young man who was killed was also at least D-rank, yet he was killed instantly by a weak guard, and such power was everywhere in the palace. At this moment, Sung Jin Wo remembered Duhe's words and turned back. The eyes of the king statue, originally motionless stone, suddenly lit up, staring straight at Sung Jin Wo, filling him with fear. Being accustomed to the boundary between life and death, he immediately realized that these peculiar eyes were about to bring disaster. He shouted, telling everyone to lie down. Before he could finish his words, the statue's eyes emitted a strange beam accompanied by a bizarre sound. A plasma beam swept across the hall, catching those who couldn't avoid it, instantly vaporizing them. Luckily, thanks to Sung Jin Wo's echoing shout, most people survived. Despite surviving, the old man lost an arm to this beam. This was the first time he felt such horror. He had participated in several B-rank dungeon eradication missions before, but had never encountered a monster that could instantly kill. This place was much more terrifying than a B-rank dungeon. He estimated that this stone statue of the king, possibly A rank, could be S rank. At this moment, they remembered the first rule of the temple: respect the deity. Perhaps the deity was the stone statue. Whether they had time to repent or not, did they have a chance to survive? They thought this was just a normal D-rank temple, but an S-rank deity appeared. The deity's gaze could destroy all creatures, being the highest ranked. Mr. Song, losing his left arm in this beam, puzzled them. They thought only a team of 3 support for a D-rank dungeon was needed. But one person evaporated from the beam, another was terrified, even Duhe, a B-rank, was trembling. At this moment, the ICE King statue was observing each person in the room. They could only stand still, not daring to move. There were still daredevils, a confident assassin regarding his speed. He took a deep breath, muscles tense, rushing towards the door at dizzying speed. As he approached, the statue groaned, and the assassin evaporated before everyone's astonished eyes. Desperation filled their hearts. These monsters were terrifyingly powerful, able to easily wipe out the entire group effortlessly. What puzzled Sung Jin Wo was that they could kill, yet they chose not to. They could kill but refrained from doing so. As he approached the door, the stone guard would attack whenever someone moved, shooting an X-ray beam. The attack seemed to follow a rule, the first rule of the Cape Gnome Temple: respect the deity. Sung Jin Wo slowly stood up. The old man thought he was crazy, but Sung Jin Wo's determined gaze wasn't that of a suicidal person. Sung Jin Wo's actions quickly attracted the attention of the stone statue. The statue's eyes emitted a bright beam, but Sung Jin Wo quickly bowed down, and the beam dissipated into smoke. Sung Jin Wo understood the meaning of the first rule. He quickly shouted, telling everyone to kneel before the statue. People thought he was crazy for making them kneel before a deity who killed without blinking an eye. But seeing Sung Jin Wo's determined gaze, it seemed he understood something. There was no better way to preserve their lives, so reluctantly, everyone knelt down to offer themselves to the deity, awaiting judgment like devotees. The bright eyes of the king statue gradually dimmed down into silence, and after a while, the king statue opened its mouth, forming a grotesque smile. This temple was full of mysteries. When people rushed in, they were marked as sacrifices. Those who offended the deity would be punished. The only way to save themselves was probably to solve the riddle on the plaque. After solving the puzzle, the first thing was to kneel before the deity. Everyone knelt before the deity who killed without blinking an eye. Seeing everyone kneel before the murderous deity, it seemed satisfied, showing a very pleased smile, a sinister smile that sent shivers down everyone's spine. But it seemed effective. the attack stopped. Thinking it was over, a big man stood up first. Seeing him not die, everyone slowly stood up. But immediately, thunder roared, the statue, originally motionless, slowly stood up. With a stomp of its foot, the ground collapsed. As the stone statue stood up, towering before everyone like a tall mountain. Still the main character, at the right moment, Sung Jin Wo remembered the second rule of the temple, praising the deity. A Christian devotee stepped forward, proficient in praising the Lord. He pulled out a cross in front of his chest, murmuring prayers. But unaware that he was praising a different deity, he was immediately crushed into mud. People panicked and fled in disarray, like ants being mercilessly trampled by a giant deity. A big man in blue ran into a corner, thinking it would be safe, but from behind, a deity wielding a sword chopped him in half, adding to the chaos. In front was the airborne deity, and behind was the deity drawing its sword, ready to attack as soon as anyone approached. In the chaos, Sung Jin Wo noticed that the statues holding musical instruments weren't attacking him, so he quickly told everyone to run to those statues. Indeed, when Mark Song approached the statue holding the trumpet, it activated and played the trumpet. The more people found these musical statues, the safer they became. Their eyes filled with fear, followed by tears streaming down their faces. Sung Jin Wo and Duhe continued to search for a musical statue. They came across a statue holding a drum, but it didn't react. It turned out that the statue only played music when someone approached her. Sung Jin Wo decided to leave Duhe behind while he searched for another statue. At this moment, the King Ice statue noticed Sung Jin Wo. He quickly found another statue, but immediately the king's statue stepped on him. Sung Jin Wo narrowly dodged by tilting his head up, realizing he mistook the shield for the warrior deity's home. Without hesitation, he raised the shield and directly faced the king's statue's blow. Despite his fierce will to survive, he never gave up and continued to crawl forward. Standing side by side with death, he always grasped the fragile thread between life and death, and this time, he caught it again. Soft praises echoed throughout the temple, and the statues ceased their movements. Duhe rushed to the scene in shock, covering her mouth as she cried uncontrollably. Sung Jin Wo was lucky to be alive, but he had lost both legs. The sin of trespassing the sanctuary weighed heavily, reducing the original team of 17 to just 6. 2 were severely injured, but the rest managed to survive the ordeal. But it seems the deity still hasn't relented. A stone platform slowly rises from the ground, seemingly an altar of worship. You understand that this is perhaps the final trial. Mr. Kim draws his sword towards Mr. Song, the one who led them into the sacred sanctuary. If a sacrifice is needed, it can only be the responsibility of the team leader. Mr. Song does not refuse. He slowly steps onto the altar carrying the responsibility of the entire group. As he steps onto the altar, flames suddenly erupt from behind, but Mr. Song remains unharmed. You don't understand what's happening. Sung Jin Wo instructs everyone to lift him onto the altar to investigate. When all 3 step onto the altar, 3 more flames appear. They realize that humans seem to be the key to activating the flames. When everyone is standing on the altar, the small flames turn into a large blaze, energy streams roaring and flowing along the grooves on the floor towards the edge of the green flames, along with all the energy flowing into them. Behind the green flames, a giant gateway opens, and the white flames gradually disappear. The colossal warrior gods come to life and slowly advance towards the altar. The group realizes that they only need to look at them to stop them, but they advance as soon as their gaze shifts away from them. This resembles their childhood game, where facing suffocation often caused those with weak spirits to collapse. A girl screams and runs off the altar, and the red flames on the altar extinguish. Strangely, she manages to escape safely. Sung Jin Wo finally understands what's happening. The green flames will extinguish after a while, and the flames on the altar go out every time someone leaves. Each time a flame goes out, the door closes a bit more, The third rule of the temple is to prove faith, that even under threat and sweet temptation, humans still hold on to faith. So, the opening door is just an illusionary trap. But even with fear and sweet temptation, humans still prefer the earthly trap. After several demonstrations by Sung Jin Wo, Mr. Kim is impressed and agrees with his speculation. But he fears that with time, the door will close. He is just an ordinary person, with a family, and does not want to die. He apologizes to Sung Jin Wo and leaves the altar despite his screams of pain. The altar loses another life flame, and the warrior gods are no longer being monitored. Slowly, they advance toward the altar. Mr. Kim's departure might result in the death of those who remain. Faced with the choice of life and death, people must hold on to their faith or rush toward the wide open door. Perhaps many will be like them, their souls filled with fear, ignoring the rules, they run towards the wide open door. Those who remain are the most pitiful. Now, there are only 3 people left on the altar. Mr. Song understands the meaning of the law: if one person remains, the door will not close. Mr. Song decides to give the chance to live to 2 young people. Sung Jin Wo has lost his legs and cannot move. So Mr. Song entrusts Sung Jin Wo to Due. However, Due collapses after exerting all her power to treat Sung Jin Wo. Sung Jin Wo doesn't say much, just instructs the elder to take Due away. But Due kneels down, unable to move. Mr. Song decides that only one person can be taken away. He takes out an E-grade stone and says to Due, I promise to take you out to eat. If you take this stone and leave now, I'll find you later for the rest of the money. Before Due can respond, he slaps her hard on the head, hoists her onto his shoulder, and runs off, not giving her a chance to think. Time was running out, leaving no room for thought. He looked at Sung Jin Wo one last time before leaving the altar, striding away decisively. Sung Jin Wo watched them leave the temple. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. Remaining alone on the altar, the warrior gods slowly advanced again with their weapons. But Sung Jin Wo was not one to give up, even in death. He wielded his weapon towards the enemy, took a deep breath, ready to sacrifice himself. A warrior god thrust straight at Sung Jin Wo, causing intense pain and bloodshed. Before he could recover, the warrior god raised his weapon and pierced through him. With a crash, he fell heavily onto the altar, the severe wound rendering him immobile. Tears of despair fell from his eyes. He couldn't accept this fate, didn't want to die like this. How could he just accept it? He wasn't a saint. Just like others had families, so did he. He carried too much, didn't want to leave with regrets. If there was still a chance, just as the blade was about to fall, a sudden window opened, and he had met the requirements to complete the mission, the courage of the weak in the mist. Sung Jin Wo felt time standing still. The sword of the warrior god seemed to freeze in place. A voice from somewhere asked if he accepted. What did it mean? Accepted, your time is running out. If you refuse for another 0.02 seconds, your heart will stop beating. Do you accept? Sung Jin Wo knew he had no other choice. He used his last breath to say, I accept. The player's status was assigned to him. Sung Jin Wo's body glowed brightly, emitting dazzling rays before the demonic beings and gods, then disappeared. He woke up, panting. Everything felt like a dream. But the suffocating feeling and pain were all too real. He looked out the window. Where was this room? 2 men in black rushed in, handing Sung Jin Wo a business card. It read, Hunter Association Surveillance Division. From their mouths, Sung Jin Wo learned that he had been asleep for 3 days. Mr. Song survived, but lost an arm, likely unable to be a hunter anymore. Due suffered severe mental trauma. They were about to continue talking about the others, when Sung Jin-wo interjected against those who abandoned their comrades for survival. He felt cold at the appearance of this ruthless motivational team causing heavy casualties. From the original 17 people, only 6 survived. Receiving reports from the survivors, the Surveillance Division and the White Tiger Guild quickly arrived at the scene. However, they found everyone had disappeared, with only Sung Jin-wo lying unconscious on the altar. If the accounts of the survivors had any contradictions or if they couldn't find any traces of dead bodies, they hesitated to believe the truth. Sung Jin-wo's miraculous survival made them suspect he had undergone enlightenment for the second time. The strength of hunters was determined during their first enlightenment, but very few cases of second enlightenment surpassing their own limits from grade C to A, or from B to S. They handed Sung Jin-wo the mana measurement device and placed their hands on it. The result making everyone burst into laughter. Even at the lowest combat level, with only 70 points achieved, Sung Jin-wo was still just an ordinary person. The 2 men in black promptly left, leaving Sung Jin-wo bewildered. He thought he had truly gained supernatural enlightenment, but he was very curious. Why weren't the others present? Did they see the window open? He noticed his legs were healed, and the wound from before death was no longer hidden. He even doubted whether he was in reality or still in a dream. He clicked on the window and immediately saw 3 notifications and an unconfirmed message. When Sung Jin-wo confirmed the message, the daily task popped up. Getting ready to become stronger, failing to complete daily tasks would result in corresponding penalties. Seeing the long list of training exercises, Sung Jin-wo shook his head in annoyance and said, "What kind of joke is this? I'm sick. How can I have the energy to do so many exercises? I'll just go back to sleep." But time waits for no one, and while Sung Jin-wo slept, time passed quickly. When the time was up, the system sent a notification that if he didn't complete the daily task, he would be sent to the punishment area. In his drowsy state, a loud noise suddenly echoed. The ground beneath Sung Jin-wo's hands turned into sand in an instant, and he was instantly transported to a desert. At this moment, there was a noise behind him, and Sung Jin-wo turned back with fear. A giant hellish insect was looking at him with hungry eyes. A window appeared, displaying the punishment task: survive within the specified time, 4 hours. This miraculous system was truly insane, with multiple daily tasks and time limits. Failure to complete them within the specified time would result in punishment. 1 second, the protagonist was peacefully asleep in bed, and the next second, he was transported to a scorching desert. Behind him, a giant insect followed, and the deeper into the desert, the more insects there were. He had to endure this hellish punishment for 4 continuous hours. Fortunately, just before being swallowed, the punishment was completed, and he immediately shifted from hell to heaven, breathing heavily. He thought this punishment task was truly terrifying. Before he could receive the reward for completing the task, he was exhausted and fell asleep. The first thing he did upon waking up was to throw himself into the next task after that punishment. He understood that it wasn't an illusion. As long as he followed the system's requirements, life would be more bearable. Completing each task also meant gaining rewards and directly enhancing his strength. Additionally, he received skills, competence points, and random gift boxes from the gift box. One of the special rewards he received was a key. This key only led him to a hidden cave, and after activation, the entrance to the underground cave appeared. He stepped through the entrance and saw another world. He could see that world, but the people in that world couldn't see him. This time, he was startled by the horrifying memories from inadvertently intruding into the cave. Those images made him want to run away, but he couldn't. The system announced that he had to defeat the final boss to be able to escape. Sung Jin-wo struggled even with low-level monsters, and he had no help. He faced danger as a giant monster rushed towards him with its mouth wide open. He quickly dodged and wasn't sure if he could fight back. Lucky to survive the encounter with the deity, he had to try to see what he could do. The the wolf charged towards him, and Sung Jin Wo rolled to evade. He was slightly surprised by his unusually light and agile body, indicating that his strength had increased slightly. He gathered his strength and punched hard, causing the wolf to fly backward towards the iron door, denting it. Sung Jin Wo couldn't believe his strength, but his regular attacks only caused minor damage to the monster. While fumbling, he remembered his weapon, opening his empty equipment storage except for one weapon. Sung Jin Wo drew his weapon and struck the wolf's head hard, successfully killing it and earning 15,000 yuan. Despite the significant destructive power, his confidence immediately soared. Even if two more monsters approached, he wasn't afraid. He raised his weapon and immediately struck down one of them. Compared to the monsters in the temple back then, this group was too weak. Just a few days ago, he was still afraid of a low-level monster. Sung Jin Wo used to be useless against even E-rank monsters, but now two E-rank monsters appeared at the same time. He still had the strength to deal with them by defeating the monsters. He leveled up, with all stats increasing by 1 point, although he didn't know how much those numbers increased. The 20-point increase in strength helped him progress in quality. He gradually understood the player's mechanics, continuously completing daily tasks of defeating monsters to level up. He could truly become stronger. He remembered that monsters would drop gems when they died. He approached the corpse of the large wolf, observing it differently from previous caves. This time, he obtained a dropped item and discovered the system's shop. He wanted to enter, but the system notified him that his level was not enough, and he could only sell wolf fangs. He received 20 gold coins but didn't know what they were used for. While he was studying the shop, a giant wolf slowly emerged from the darkness, followed by countless pairs of eyes and a horde of giant wolves. Sung Jin Wo's eyes were no longer afraid. He had died once before. But once again wielding his sword, he approached the pack of wolves without a hint of fear. With a strong blow, a wolf from behind bit into him. He swung his sword fiercely backward, but the wolf pack quickly surrounded him. His eyes changed, a streak of fire tearing through the air, destroying each ferocious wolf. He didn't know if he could survive, but he knew that if he gave up here, his death would be meaningless. Only by being strong could he protect the ones he loved. He continued to defeat more wolves, quickly leveling up. The pack, which used to have the advantage of numbers, now seemed frightened and retreated. He paid no attention to the wounds on his body, blood dwindled. Sung Jin Wo gripped his sword tightly as he slowly advanced into the ferocious wolf pack. He charged into the pack, another fierce battle ensuing, successfully defeating the pack of giant wolves. Panting heavily from exhaustion, his arm grew weary, gripping the sword tightly as it dragged along the ground. He moved to another area, looking up to see another pack of giant wolves. He breathed deeply, gritting his teeth, another brutal battle about to commence. After a fierce struggle, he successfully defeated another pack of wolves, but his sword was damaged from excessive use. Of course, he had anticipated that even expensive weapons would break after several uses. Previously, he had saved up money to buy a sword worth over 3,000 yuan. At first, defeating small monsters was quite easy, but when facing the boss, his sword was immediately destroyed. In the end, he only received 3 grade E stones. Despite the heavy losses, Sung Jin Wo still decided to fight bare-handed, defeating each monster by killing countless giant wolves. He earned the title of Wolf Hunter when facing the species, and all his stats increased by 40 points. This was like a gift from the heavens for Sung Jin Wo. In addition, he obtained wolf fangs, 2 sword hilts, a hiking outfit, and an item to return. He thought he had enough loot to return for the day. As he turned to leave, the thought crossed his mind briefly, but he couldn't bring himself to leave the loot behind. Fortunately, he found a place to level up by fighting monsters, but he didn't know when he would encounter this opportunity again. He couldn't just leave like this. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to pack the loot into his bag and slowly venture into the unknown territory. As he went deeper, the monsters grew stronger, but thanks to continuously defeating them, Sung Jin Wo leveled up after each encounter. Fighting monsters became easier, and he could clearly feel his body growing stronger. Sung Jin Wo also realized that this place was different from ordinary caves, where monsters could continuously respawn. This makes him feel like he's fighting living creatures, like battling monsters in a game. Just by understanding their fixed patterns, he can anticipate where they will appear. Monkeys drop down from above, and on both sides, there are cats pouncing. He predicts the enemy's attack pattern in advance and can easily defeat them when facing repeated enemy appearances. Sung Jin Woo's eyes are calm, his hand wielding the sword easily eliminating the creatures. Sung Jin Wo also notices that each creature has a name and color on its head. White names signify creatures weaker than him, orange are equal or stronger, and red ones are very powerful. The dragon he initially encountered changed from orange to white, meaning Sung Jin Wo is becoming noticeably stronger. Despite being stronger, the cold air from below still gives Sung Jin Wo shivers. He clearly senses something terrifying below. He contemplates that killing small monsters won't level up anymore, and continuing futile fights will damage this 10,000-year-old sword. So, there's only one choice: facing his fears. Sung Jin Wo slowly descends the stairs, the familiar steps now making him feel longer than usual. Descending to the lower floor is a swampy area, with crumbling buildings, wild grass growing rampant, and chilly wind sneaking through. From the shadows, the sound of slithering echoes again. Before Sung Jin Wo could react, something moves lightning fast on the ground. Sung Jin Wo barely has time to see what it is before it appears right in front of him. He quickly uses his sword to defend himself, but a strong force pushes him back. He flies out and crashes into the wall, spewing a mouthful of blood before falling to the ground gasping for breath. Worse, his 10,000-year-old sword is missing a large chunk. After that impact, the broken pieces fall around him, leaving him exhausted. He sits down, grimacing, thinking that his level has increased significantly, only to be defeated by an orange monster like this. The giant snake opens its mouth wide, revealing two sharp fangs, mocking its prey in front of it. Sung Jin Wo catches his breath, alert, seizing the opportunity to wield the broken sword. Turning the sword into a dagger, he unexpectedly loses in his first solo battle against the boss, failing right from the start with the 10,000-year-old sword. Suddenly, it turns into a dagger. Looking at the scales of this creature, using a weapon is uncertain to pierce through. Unfortunately, before he can think further, the beast opens its mouth wide and charges at him. Sung Jin Wo scratches himself with the dagger, but it's like scratching an itch. Not only does it not cause any damage, but it also angers the creature. The giant snake lashes out, spinning around repeatedly. Suddenly, a tail swings towards Sung Jin Wo's face. He quickly uses the broken sword to block it, but the snake's tail knocks it away. Then the snake's body coils tightly around Sung Jin Wo, squeezing him so tight he can't breathe. He struggles to break free, eventually collapsing to the ground gasping for air. He thought he had leveled up significantly, at least enough to withstand the blow a little better, but he is surprised at how weak he feels. He must become even stronger, as strength is the key to breaking free from this feeling of helplessness. He uses the forging hammer to fend off the snake's attacks, emitting a deafening noise. He pushes the snake's head away with a swing. Kneeling on the ground, he takes a deep breath, gripping the forging hammer and approaching the giant snake. The broken sword in his hand only has overwhelming power, only absolute strength can make them bow their heads, obey, and submit. False morality cannot protect oneself no matter how much the opponent insults. In front of strength, everything fades away in the face of fear. Everything will fade away because of weakness, will be despised, no matter how knowledgeable and wise. Thanks to that, appreciation is given to absolute strength. Only when oneself is strong enough will they be truly respected, otherwise, they will still be easily betrayed. Sung Jin Wo is thrown by the snake. Its tail swipes at him, roaring, slamming straight into the wall. He struggles, crawls up, his hands trembling, but he feels an unusual excitement, because the monster in front of him is still not strong enough compared to that guy, far from it. Compared to the fear, there's nothing to be afraid of. Sung Jin Woo jumps up, swipes the broken sword across the snake's body. The snake's eyes suddenly widen, its head lunges forward to bite. Sung Jin Woo leans back, dodges, then rushes forward to tightly hug the snake's neck, squeezing hard with his fingers. He grips the snake's hard scales like iron, sinking in. The snake emits a painful roar, shaking and pulling Sung Jin Woo around. Sung Jin Woo pushes forward with all his strength, risking death. The snake's hard scales continuously crack, accompanied by painful cries. Finally, he successfully kills the boss, receiving the item it drops, Casca's venom, the new Mio Casca venom gland. A few days ago, he couldn't defeat low-level monsters. Now, he has strangled, killed the final boss bare-handed, killed thousands of enemies, and lost 800M himself. His body is also lightly injured all over. The 10,000-year sword has turned into a short sword. Fortunately, he has a better weapon, a short sword made from snake fangs, doubling the usual attack power, with effects that paralyze and cause enemies to bleed. He also received a beast from the boss's dropped item, its strength unknown. A window appears, the final boss has been defeated. The cave inside will restore as usual, the ceiling falls like a puzzle piece, the entire cave space quickly disappears. He returns to the real subway station, climbs the stairs, and reaches the ground. Strangely, it's empty around, not a soul in sight. Suddenly, a soldier with a gun approaches and asks, Sung Jin Woo, what are you doing? Didn't you hear the announcement? Sung Jin Woo, still blurry, replies, what's going on? The soldier, seeing his broken sword and tattered clothes, realizes he's a hunter. Immediately, he respects Sung Jin Woo and guides him. On the way, Sung Jin Woo sees wrecked cars and scattered monster corpses everywhere. The soldier explains that monster portals suddenly appeared around, bringing creatures to this world. Most of the monsters have been defeated, only one giant monster remains, probably due to Sung Jin Woo's leveling up. Clearly, he senses that the giant is the final boss on the path to peace. With one foot stomping down, it shakes the ground. The giant monster emits light, roaring beneath its feet. The hunters are attacking all around, and a curious crowd watches from a distance, discussing what the hunters are doing, how long they will fight, and what happens if the damage increases and the land price decreases. They even take out their phones to record videos and take pictures. In reality, the hunters are trying hard, they crave continuous attacks, but the physical defense of the monster is too high. Among the group, not many hunters use magic, and there's a risk of backlash. Sung Jin Woo has arrived and only sees the chaotic battle of the hunters. He finds it illogical for this group to gather, with a formation lacking skill and insufficient numbers. There are 8 E-rank hunters, 1 D-rank, and 1 B-rank healer. Among them, the B-rank is Duhe, someone he knows well and is his closest friend. Despite being B-rank, in this battle, she seems helpless and appears not to have fully recovered from the terrifying shock a week ago. Sung Jin Woo is not surprised, in fact, he hasn't completely overcome it himself. But he decides he must surpass it, holding his sword firmly and standing firm on the battlefield. This boss is stronger than the previous one, just breaking through his defense can lead to victory. He needs a powerful attack to penetrate his defensive layer. Sung Jin Woo's neck veins bulged as he hurled his weapon towards the boss. At this moment, the hunters were in disarray, but without assistance from higher-ranked hunters, they were running out of steam. Suddenly, a loud roar, and the boss lost its defense and slowly toppled over. The hunters saw this and rushed in to relentlessly attack the final boss, eventually killing it. The hunters felt puzzled because previously, their attacks had no effect on the boss. Why did it suddenly collapse like that? No, it wasn't entirely unscathed from those attacks. What flew over just now? Did it knock down the monster? What exactly pierced its head? It seemed like it was him, a giant monster. Knocked down by such an old sword, who did this in the end? He asked the soldier standing nearby. He didn't look down at the broken sword, and the soldier jumped and said, "Isn't this the hunter's weapon? He was here just now, right? Such power, could he be a high-ranking hunter?" Sung Jin Woo left the scene, and even he was a bit surprised. One strike had knocked out the boss, and his power had indeed increased significantly. Looking at the noisy crowd, Duhee was slightly stunned. She seemed to catch a glimpse of Sung Jin Woo, the weak boy from before, who had now become a muscular man. He had to complete the daily tasks assigned by the system, thanks to relentless training. His body grew stronger and taller day by day. He opened the status window and only saw the points added to his strength. He had a bad feeling that if this continued, he would turn into a bulky man. Increasing strength was good, but if it didn't affect the enemy, it was useless. Strength and agility could complement each other, and good physical fitness combined with magical intelligence. He decided to allocate stat points to ensure balance. At this moment, there was a call to Sung Jin Woo, which seemed like a scolding call, but on the contrary, it was the landlord demanding rent. He quickly answered and promised to pay the rent later. Sung Jin Woo thought that now, with his development, he would surely earn the rent money more quickly. If he continued to develop like this, he would soon become a high-ranking hunter, earning money by catching monsters and accumulating experience to level up. The more gems obtained from monsters, the higher the gem prices. To hunt higher-level monsters, he had to go to higher-level teleport gates. However, at the moment, he only has access to the level E gate and 2 lower-level gates. The number of hunters at these 2 levels is very high, leading to fierce competition. Therefore, the level E gate not only has no acceptance opportunities but also makes it difficult to find work. Currently, Sung Jin Woo is at level E in the association system, and moving to a higher level is still challenging. He thought, well, then I'll go check at the guild and level up. However, he read news and events about the second awakening, which was the most attention-grabbing. He realized that if he leveled up too quickly and attracted attention, he might be eyed by some strange forces, causing major trouble. Therefore, he decided to keep a low profile and only seek to join private groups. Through an online recruitment page, he quickly found the Sung Jin Woo team at a site where many hunters gathered. A giant waved to him, introducing themselves. The guy said that bad talk wouldn't get through, and good talk wouldn't leave the house. Hearing about Sung Jin Woo's past defeat, he laughed sarcastically, saying it was the weakest weapon on earth. The team captain handed Sung Jin Woo a contract to sign. The reason for inviting him to the team was to enter the level C cave. They needed a minimum of 10 people, so they needed a level E hunter like him to have enough manpower for the job. They would pay him 12,000 yuan in cash. Sung Jin Woo glanced at the 5 level C hunters, 4 level D ones below. Indeed, he was just there to make up the numbers. Another person with enough gear was a level D hunter wearing flashy clothes. Surely, he was the one spending money on the game. Sung Jin Woo's job was to follow them, carry their gear. He suddenly remembered that the group was short of healers. The giant told him that it was difficult for an offensive team like theirs to recruit healers. We usually manage without them, Sung Jin Woo sighed. An offensive team with only blockers and damage dealers, it was chaotic. The contract explicitly stated that any accidents in the cave were the individual's responsibility. So, Sung Jin Woo felt anxious. The wealthy guy patted Sung Jin Woo's shoulder with his titan-sized hand, telling him not to worry. With him around, everything would be fine. Sung Jin Woo remained indifferent, unsure whether to laugh or cry. After preparations were done, they all headed towards the level C cave. This was how a gaming tycoon appeared. Without comparison, Sung Jin Woo felt disadvantaged as he entered without a weapon. while the other guy was decked out head to toe in Titan gear. Sung Jin Wo entered the cave for survival, while the other guy played the game just for fun.